Welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel Davis. Coming up upon us is Mother's Day, but for a lot of people there are going to be opportunities to visit with their mother, have dinner, maybe go for a walk or chat, and for others, well, it's going to be a Motherless Mother's Day. That'll be equal parts tear and laughter to honor the mothers no longer with us. Through remembering we no longer are alone, through sharing their stories, our mothers live on among us. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a personalized civil life cycle celebrant. She will address the many nationwide who don't have mothers who are alive and well to celebrate Mother's Day. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Shay Wiesna. Shay, how are you today?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Very good. Now, tell us about your background and how you got involved with Celebrant Institute.
Well, sure. Well, first of all, my name is Shay Wiesna, and I am a life cycle celebrant with the Celebrant Institute in New Jersey. And I went through their training program in 2008 and 2009. I specialize in ceremonies for healing, so funerals and transitional ceremonies. And basically, for your listening audience who don't know yet what celebrants are, and that's the root is celebration, so celebrants, we are non-denominational officiants who create highly personalized ceremonies that actually reflect and honor the beliefs of our client, as opposed to putting our beliefs onto them. We honor their beliefs.
Now, when was the very first Motherless Mother's Day?
The very first one that we did was in 2010. I had lost my own mother. Phyllis T. Zeff had died of cervical cancer 20 years ago, Christmas Eve of 1994. And after I went through the training to become a celebrant, I just realized that there were a lot of people out in the world, myself included, for whom Mother's Day was a painful experience. My strategy at the time, before I became a celebrant, was just to avoid going into stores and just turn off the radio and the TV, because every time I would hear something that was advertising Mother's Day, it was like a knife in my heart, because I really wanted to buy flowers or, call my mom on Mother's Day, and she just wasn't around for me to do that. So it finally occurred to me that there were a lot of other people out in the world who were in the same boat that I was. So I came up with the idea for a Motherless Mother's Day celebration, and the first one was in 2010 here in Portland, Oregon.
It's really fascinating to realize that sometimes we come up with these kinds of, if you want to call them holidays, we seem to be very creative, especially with something like this. You can see where the inspiration came from. I was kind of curious, though, what is a celebrant?
Sure. Well, like I was saying, a celebrant is a non-denominational officiant.
Okay.
So kind of like I don't want to say a minister, because we're not affiliated with any type of religious organization. So the idea of celebrancy actually started in Australia, because there were a lot of people there who weren't affiliated with any kind of church or religion, organized church or religion. But people still, they get married, they have kids, they die, and they want to mark the milestones in their lives with ceremonies and celebrations. And then that idea came over here, and right after 9/11, a group of people in New Jersey on the East Coast, they banded together and formed the Celebrant Institute, and they started training people. And it just came from a spontaneous need that they saw in our society to have celebrations where we were honoring the beliefs of other people as opposed to placing our own beliefs on them. And it's grown. It's now an international movement. And the interesting thing about the Celebrant Institute is that I would say we're about 87% female, which I just find fascinating, because I don't know about you and Joy in your lives, but I know that in my life it's women do a lot of the socializing and the networking. Mm-hmm. We're very good at that, and we're kind of the glue that hold together families and communities. And so it makes sense to me, because in a lot of organized religions, women have been well, I don't want to say excluded from being in positions of, being officiants, but they are definitely welcome in the Celebrant Institute. Men are as well, but it's predominantly female. I'd say about 85, 87%.
Mm-hmm. When we have this Motherless Mother's Day event, what can people expect to have happen?
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't know a lot of the people who come. And this year I actually put an ad out on Facebook, and so I've got most of the people who are coming are people who are responding to the ad that I placed on Facebook. So what they can expect, I've asked people to bring with them a photo of their mom, a story to tell, and a potluck dish to share, something that either she would have made or that she would have enjoyed eating. And so the ceremony, we do a lot of sharing with each other. We tell our mothers' stories. We tell the stories of our relationships with them. We listen to other people's stories about their moms as well. And what I've found is that I think one of the most important aspects of this celebration is that we're not isolated. Grief is not a linear process. It's a cyclical thing, which means that every year on the anniversary of death or on birthdays or on Mother's Day or other special occasions, there's a renewal of grief. And in our society, we tend to, there's a lot of attention whenever there's a funeral. Families come together, friends come together. But in the years after a death, people tend to go back to their lives, and you're kind of supposed to tough it out and just get over it. But grief isn't like that. So what I have come to do is form celebrations in groups where we come together, because we can get through these dark nights of the soul together much better than we can if we're alone. So that's the idea behind Motherless Mother's Day, is let's come together, let's share the sad stuff, but there's also a lot of laughter. That was the thing that was the most surprising to me the first year that we did this. I was expecting the tears. I was not expecting the laughter, and that was really a gift.
Well, I think when you come together with something like this is that you realize, well, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's had this experience. And in a very subtle, maybe even a subliminal way, you're given permission about how to feel.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And the other thing that happens is we are forming new relationships. Nothing can ever replace the relationship between a mother and her children, or nothing can ever replace that. But you can make new friends. You can form new alliances and allies and friendships and relationships. And so this is part of the healing process, is just forming an intentional or logical community of people who've also shared a loss.
Mm-hmm. Now, I could see that this wouldn't change the nature of grief, as you were talking about. It's not a linear process by any means. Mm-hmm. But would you say that it possibly accelerates it a little more as far as the healing aspect of it goes?
I believe that it does.
Okay.
I believe that when you share grief or when you share happiness, when you share sad things with others, it helps you to get over them. It helps you to get through them. And when you share joy, it just intensifies the joy. There's more of it. I don't know. There's probably a mathematical equation for that somewhere, but I'm not sure what it is. I think I also wanted to say that one of the reasons that I started this Motherless Mother's Day thing is because it's really what was needed for our time. I believe that there's a spirit of a time for each age. I call it the Zeitgeist. It's a German word, that means the spirit of the time. And those of us who are paying attention, those of us who have our finger on the pulse of what is needed, we're creating new patterns, new celebrations, new rituals and ceremonies. And this is what we do as celebrants. Mm-hmm. I believe that originally tradition must have been innovation and imagination, because other people were paying attention to what was going on and what was needed in their communities and in their times, and they created something something new, and it so resonated with their communities that people took it up, that they did it again and again, that they passed it on to their kids. So that's something that I find very exciting about being a celebrant, is that I am trying to pay attention to what's needed. And I think that this is also something that you see when you see an idea popping up in more than one place at a time, because the response to my Motherless Mother's Day celebration has been, this makes so much sense. Why is this the first time that I'm going to this, or why is this the first time that I'm hearing about it? And I say, because it's what's needed for the time, and its time has come.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the biggest aspect of all this, when you kind of take a step back and you look at the big picture, is the fact that, especially in American society, we just don't see a lot of rites of passage, if you will, or, as you were saying, rituals. It seems to be, this day and age, the rituals are, your child goes to high school, graduates, that's a ritual. They get their driver's license, that's a ritual. You know, you go to college, maybe you graduate from that, that's a ritual. You have children, that's a ritual. Outside of maybe going to a funeral, there isn't really a ritual outside of that. You know, you just sort of go, but then that's the end of it, and everybody scatters and goes about their business. But there's no ritual or rite of passage about all that. And I can see where something like this kind of comes in and does that for people.
Absolutely. And that is actually, so there is a groundswell of ceremonies and celebrations that are being created all over the world, and I would like to I'd like to suggest that you check out, it's the celebrantinstitute.org, and they're in Montclair, New Jersey, and they just have a wealth of information, because that's exactly what we're doing as celebrants, is we're saying, well, there's so many different opportunities to mark the milestones of our lives. I mean, for example, so in this country, it started after 9/11, and because you're right, there really wasn't anything that we could get together and do that had already been organized for us. And so my colleagues in the Celebrant Institute, they created meaningful ritual and ceremonies to grieve collectively what had just happened in our country. And the same thing is happening just all over our country and now around the world also, as celebrancy really spreads, is that people they're creating new ceremonies, they're studying old ceremonies and celebrations. We have a very strong basis in looking at world traditions, and so we're looking at the meaning of, you know, rites of passage and passing through the doorway, where you start off in one state and then you go through a transition into another state of becoming. So an example of this would be like a croning ceremony for women who are going through menopause and they're transitioning from one stage of life into the next. Retirement celebrations, those are another example. So, you know, there's just so much in the way of opportunity, so much for us to celebrate and for us to just pay attention to.
Well, Shay, I don't know about the retirement celebration. You know, people just really aren't looking at that as much as they used to, because you really do see a change. You know, that we're not in the industrialized America anymore. We're moving into a new millennium. We have, you know, your X generation, which are highly entrepreneurial. You know, people just don't believe in the big company and the longevity and the loyalty like they used to anymore. But, you know, certainly if you decide to sell off your business, I guess that could be a retirement celebration.
Absolutely. You know, and I mean, and there have been people who have done divorce ceremonies, because that's you know, that requires healing. You know, it's like it's the end. Sometimes you can look at it as it's the death of a marriage. You're trying to set that aside and move on into something that's healthier. You're trying to remember the good things, take the good things with you, and leave behind the things that stopped working.
Right.
So a divorce ceremony is something, you know, as an example. There's so many wonderful ceremonies and ideas. So besides the Motherless Mother's Day celebration, I've had people asking me this year, so what about a Father's Day celebration? I'm like, next year. I'm going to try to do it next year. But one of the other celebrations that I do is something that I call an Earth Father's Day celebration. And then then that would be also with the Earth Mother's Day celebration. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of friends who have made conscientious decisions to not have children, and yet these people are just some of the most caring individuals I've ever known, caring and loving, and they dedicate their lives to taking care of, the trees, the plants, the cats, the wildlife, the earth, so, and other people's kids too, they're teachers and they're mentors. So, so that's something else that I'm seeing. I'm like, well, why can't we honor these people with a celebration as well? Why can't we spread their stories? I'm all about telling stories and about sharing these things and planting seeds so that other people will know what's going on.
Well, I just think really when you take a look at this overall theme of what we're talking about here, just celebrating in general kind of makes us all feel a little bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. I know that after my Motherless Mother's Day celebrations in previous years, you can almost see that the weight of the world has been taken off of people's shoulders. They stand up a little bit straighter. They've usually been crying, but then after the crying, it's like the storm has passed, and it's definitely like there's a weight that's off of their hearts, and people do feel lightened by the celebration.
Like I said, it seems so marvelous to see something like this come around where a person has an opportunity to see maybe sometimes how am I supposed to feel, how am I supposed to react, how am I supposed to express these things. To give you an idea, and this is a true story, this goes back quite a few years, is my mother had called me one day and she says, grandmother's died.
Wow.
Now, I really didn't have much of a relationship with her. It had seemed like 15, 20 years was the last time I had seen her before this call. And the truth is, I felt a little stupid because I wasn't sure how I felt about that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I think when you separate from someone from that period of time, it's like, well, I know that's who they are, but I really didn't have much of a relationship with her after we moved out of California when I was a child. And there it is. So I just sat there. And then even funnier was this. Well, not that was real funny, but then years later she calls and she says, one of my aunts had died. And I just kind of, well, how do you feel about that? My mom kind of laughed because, well, she was kind of a hardcore partier turned religious fanatic kind of a thing and drove basically everybody away. And then, eventually she passed. But, and it was, so it's really interesting how you might feel about family members who pass, how you really feel about it, so to speak. So not all of these are going to be one of those real hard blows that really take the wind out of your sail and you find yourself crying buckets. It could be something like that where you go, I felt this way. Maybe somebody at one of these celebrate, gatherings says, I felt that way too, but I guess that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, death it's so complex, and,
right.
And people aren't perfect also, so there was just a conversation, there's a celebrant group on Facebook, and there was just a conversation I was reading yesterday where they were talking about, well, one of my celebrant colleagues was hired to create a funeral for a man who had passed away, and as she was interviewing his family and friends, she was coming back and saying, wow, people didn't like this guy. He was kind of gruff around the edges, and he was kind of mean to people. And the question came up, well, how do you eulogize a person like this? And several of my colleague, my celebrant colleagues, they were pretty brilliant about it. One, Melissa Coe, who's local here in Lake Oswego, Melissa came up with she said, well, the way that I handle it is I do some serious tongue-in-cheek where she will do like lengthy pauses when she's talking about and so this gentleman, I'm just going to make up a name, let's say, Mr. Smith, he could be really, and then she would just pause for dramatic effect. he really knew his own mind, and so she would say these things with these pregnant pauses, and then she would, have like a little bit of a smile to her face as she was saying these things. And everybody everybody who was gathered for the funeral, they knew exactly what she meant, and she didn't have to spell it out. She didn't have to say, yeah, this guy was a real jerk, but she implied it in just such a light-hearted kind of way that everybody understood what she meant. And they were able to just kind of laugh and not, look at each other and nod knowingly, and just kind of move on. So I guess that's also just a really great opportunity to recommend the use of humor.
Mm-hmm. And that light American sarcasm that we tend to have from time to time.
Exactly.
Now, again, if you could, Shay, give out that website where people can find out more about this.
Sure. About Motherless Mother's Day?
Yes.
Okay, so if you want to look at the Motherless Mother's Day page, you can go to http:// and then the word tiny, like little, .cc/ Y as in yellow, E as in Edward, S as in Sam, V as in Victory, E as in Edward, X as in X-ray. And then if you want to learn more about the Celebrant Foundation and Institute, you would go to celebrantinstitute.org. And Celebrant, I'll spell that out for you phonetically. So it's C as in cat, E as in Edward, L as in Lima, E as in Edward, B as in Bravo, R as in Romeo, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, and then the word institute.org.
Oh, very good. Fascinating to know this is out there and that you're actually helping to have people come together. And, the grieving process isn't always an easy place to, navigate, but certainly when you're not doing it alone, it certainly gets a little lighter, doesn't it?
It really does. And the other thing, we were talking about this a little bit before, is that our culture doesn't really have blueprints for a lot of these things that we're faced with. I always have people come to me and say, Shay, my friend just died, and I'm scared to go see her. I have no idea what to say. And what I tell these people is, what's important is not what you say. What's important is that you go and that you be present with your friend, and that you just be a witness to her grief and to what she's going through. There's no right or wrong thing, just be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a big part of what we do, I believe, as celebrants. It's a big part of what I do, is that it's a lot about education. How do you deal with these things? And
mm-hmm.
and well, it's been a year, it's been 3 years, or it's been 10 years. Why do I still feel sad on Mother's Day? Well, it's because that's how grief works.
Mm-hmm.
And you just need to prepare for that and realize that, come Mother's Day or your mom's birthday or the anniversary of her death, you're going to be feeling like this. And actually, I've created something with that in mind called an anniversary memorial ceremony. And what these are is, on the anniversary of a person's death, when there's the renewal of grief, I recommend to people that they call me in advance, me or one of the other wonderful celebrants who lives in Oregon, or all over the world, actually, and that we plan an anniversary memorial service, that we come together and that we celebrate the life of your loved one together.
That's really, really sweet. I really like this whole thing that you're talking about here because, like I said, it's so often you see people that feel so isolated about something like this, or they have that look like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, because as you said, there's real no blueprint for something like this, but that you've initiated something like the Celebrant and the Motherless Mother's Day ceremony to be able to get people to understand, hey, no, there isn't, but let's just kind of do this all together.
Yeah, absolutely. We're stronger if we do this together. I was once, years ago, I was living in Santa Cruz, California, and I was in a department store during the Loma Prieta earthquake, and all of the women and kids, we all huddled underneath the threshold of the door because that's all that we knew to do. And women were crying, and kids were screaming, and I don't know what came over me, but I just, in a really loud, calm voice, said, "It's okay. We're all right. We're in this together. We're going to be okay." And as soon as the world stopped shaking, I said, "Come on, everyone. Let's get out of here." And I made a beeline for the nearest door. So I don't know what it is that just I just believe that. I believe that we're stronger together, that we can help each other get through hard stuff better together, and that we can laugh and have a great time together as well.
Mm-hmm. Shay, thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Daniel, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Go ahead and give out that website one more time.
Okay, so for the Motherless Mother's Day ceremony, you can actually find it on Facebook. It's a Facebook event, and the URL for that is http://tiny.cc/yes-vex. So it's YES, and then V as in Victor, E as in Edward, X as in X-ray. And then the Celebrant Institute in New Jersey is going to be celebrantinstitute.org. And tell them that I sent you.
Very good. Shay, again, thank you for joining us here on the program.
It was a pleasure, Daniel. You have a great day.
And for all of you out there and your mothers are still around, be sure to have a wonderful Mother's Day this weekend. Celebrate and just let her know that you'll love her. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.